Wait till you're announced. We've not yet lost all our graces. The hounds will stay in chase.
Good evening and welcome to the March 4th, 2019 regular meeting of the Mayor and City Council. First item on our agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance. I'd like to invite our good friend Barbara Cruz from Johns Hopkins University to the podium to lead us in the pledge. If everyone could please rise.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Barbara. Next on our agenda is reflection. I'd like to call for a moment of silence, please. Thank you very much. Next, we have approval of minutes. Tonight, we have two sets of minutes before us for the council. First being regular session held on January 7th, 2019. What is the pleasure of the council?
Mr. Mayor, I'll move approval of the minutes of the regular session of January 7th.
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that carries 5-0. And next we have the minutes from the work session held on February 11th. What is the pleasure of the council?
Mr. Mayor, I'll move approval of the minutes from the work session of February 11th.
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, carries 5-0. Next, we have appointments. Let's see. We have appointments and one reappointment to various committees. What's the pleasure of the council?
Mr. Mayor, I move that we approve the appointments that you have requested for the Economic and Business Development Committee, 3-year term expiring March 2022 for Barbara Cruz, and the reappointments for the Cultural Arts Advisory Committee, 2-year term to expire March 2021 for Loretta McNally and for Reynaldo Rojas, and a 2-year term on the Cultural Arts Advisory Committee for Jim Rolfus, term to expire March of 2021.
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, carries 5-0. I know Barbara's here. Is anybody else whose name we just called present this evening? Well, let's give Barbara a round of applause for volunteering. Thank you, and we will thank the others as we see them. Next, we're going to move on to presentations, and a whole number of people are going to join me at the podium. Barbara Cruz from Johns Hopkins, Margot Goldman from Gaithersburg Help, Jack Bell, Nourish Now, Diana Tato Niktash, and Amanda Nesher from the County Health and Human Services Security Plan. Everyone please join me at the podium. So, we are about to proclaim Hunger Awareness Month in the city of Gaithersburg, and we have some real special programming coming up too, so that we're really excited about. Food insecurity is a challenging issue that impacts health and mental health, nutrition, poor school performance, healthcare costs, and many other quality of life issues. It's estimated that approximately 6,600 residents in the city of Gaithersburg rely on food assistance programs each year. By proclaiming March as Hunger Awareness Month, we hope to shine a light on this important issue and provide resources to both those who are in need of food assistance and those who would like to volunteer their time and resources to help. The city is partnering with King Arthur Flour Bake for Good program to host a number of community events where Gaithersburg residents can learn the basics of baking bread and other goods. Participants will receive enough ingredients to make 2 loaves of bread, one for themselves and one to donate to a friend, neighbor, or participating nonprofit organization. A list of Bake for Good activities as well as resource information about food and nutrition programs can be found on the city's website. Ryan, show everybody the package we received from, or Mike's got it. Just a little show and tell there, because we all received our ingredients from King Arthur Flour. Tonight's proclamation is being accepted by several people involved in this initiative, including Barbara Cruz, who's right here, representing Johns Hopkins University, which has hosted a STEM baking program for students for several years. Diana Tato-Niktash and Amanda Nesher of Montgomery County Department of Health and Human Services Food Security Plan, and representatives of the Food and Nutrition Collaboration that the city contracts with to provide services to our residents, Jack Bell of Nourish Now and Margot Goldman of Gaithersburg Health. So I'm going to read the proclamation, and if any of you wish to make a statement, I'm going to open it up to you, but it's not, I don't want to put anybody on the spot. Proclamation of the Mayor and City Council of Gaithersburg. Whereas food insecurity, defined as the lack of consistent access to enough food for an active, healthy life, affects 1 in 8 Americans, or nearly 55 million people, including 13 million children every year. And whereas food insecurity causes other critical issues for individuals, such as poor health and nutrition, increased healthcare costs for individuals, businesses, and municipalities, and lower test scores for children. And whereas it is estimated that nearly 64,000 people in Montgomery County are food insecure, and approximately 6,600 people in Gaithersburg rely on food assistance programs every year. And whereas bringing awareness to food insecurity in the city of Gaithersburg aligns with the Character Counts values of citizenship, responsibility, and caring for our neighbors. And whereas educating residents about food resources in the city of Gaithersburg and informing them about the many opportunities to volunteer and donate to local organizations will increase visibility for this issue. Now, therefore, I, Judd Ashman, by the power vested in me as Mayor of Gaithersburg, do hereby proclaim the month of March 2019 as Hunger Awareness Month in the city of Gaithersburg, and encourage all citizens to explore community resources and engage in activities to help those experiencing food insecurity. Proclaim this 4th day of March 2019, signed by me. Let's give these guys a round of applause. Does anybody want to give you first? Go right ahead, Barbara.
Okay. This program has been underway. We've been working on this program for a year with the city staff, and I couldn't be more thrilled to be a Gaithersburg resident and to be able to bring this program to the community. King Arthur Flour donates all the materials, so everything going on in the city through the month is done on a complimentary basis by King Arthur Flour. They do this across the country year after year, where they educate upwards of 30,000 children every year how to bake and share.
This is the first where it's a whole community.
This is we are the very first time that they've taken this idea and brought it to a city or a town, and they chose Gaithersburg as the first place to do that because of what a wonderful community we are. And it's quite an honor, and it speaks volumes to everyone who lives here. So I encourage everyone here, if you have kids that are in school, you'll probably be seeing these kids coming home to your house. 12 elementary and middle schools in the city have signed on to have this program in their school, and there are 5 community events, all complimentary, available to any resident, friend, family, person who happens to be in Gaithersburg that would like to come. So bake. Our town should smell great as we're walking around if everyone is baking and sharing. And sharing a part of yourself is the big message that the kids are going to get. Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you. Oh, that's a first. Have some flour.
Yeah, I'm probably the only one up here who's actually going to do anything with it. Thank
Tony.
you.
Thank you. We're going to do our employee recognition.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Mr. Jimmy, can you report?
Yes, sir.
All these are a real pleasure to introduce, but Jimmy and I go way back, and he's worked with the city's Gaithersburg Homeless Services Division for nearly 25 years. And to no one's surprise, he was nominated for his outstanding work, his dedication, and sincere compassion he shows to everyone. An example, coworker notes, Jimmy truly has a heart of gold. He's one of the most selfless individuals I've ever had the good fortune to know. Everyone's nodding, because everyone knows. His consideration is not just reserved for those he works with or for the individuals he personally knows. Jimmy would, and probably has, given the shirt off his own back to someone who needed it. Thankfully, Jimmy is fully dressed with us this evening. Jim, it's just been a great pleasure working with you all these years. It's one of the most deserved awards we've had in this chamber in a long time, and congratulations.
Thank you very much.
The next team is, I've lost my,
It's the next page.
no, I had a introduction.
Oh, okay.
If I could ask Mark Kober and Mark Scafidi, Greg Horton, Sean Sarandis, Kevin Youngkins, Bobby Cox, and Tim Cox. Hopefully I have not missed anyone. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I think we got them all. Thanks for coming out. Huh? Good to see you. Thanks. 3, 5, 6, 7. Thanks for coming in. Mark. This is a leaf collection team who won for their exceptional hard work this past leaf collection season. We, as most people know, we had a record-setting amount of rainfall in 2018, and trees dropped their leaves later and produced heavy wet piles of leaves. Most people don't know that we do need to switch our fleet over from leaf collection to snow plowing on a pretty tight time frame, which means this crew really had to work hard by the end of the season to get everything done. It's an interesting business to be in. A lot of cities and counties don't actually collect leaves anymore, but every one of these guys could tell you a story about how they picked a street completely clean, only to have someone call an hour later and say they missed a pile that they swear was there an hour ago. But they always have a great sense of humor and a great sense of purpose in providing this service, which is one of the things that makes Gaithersburg a special place. The additional services that we give our residents. So thank you very much, guys, for the great work that you do, not only with leaf collection, but for all the things you do, drive the big trucks for. So congratulations.
Let me just say one thing. I was not part of this team. I nominated these guys because there's probably 25 to 30 of these guys that were, for 2 straight months, just busting their behinds out there and taking care of business. And like Tony said, the there were more complaints this year than ever before. I think we had, major leaf drop out there, but they got the job done, smiles on their faces, and I'm real proud of these guys. So, another round of applause.
They can take the rest of the day off.
Next, I'd like to invite Monica to give us an update on the legislative session.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I am joined today by Barbara Zektik from Alexander Cleaver, a great lobbying firm. So she's going to go ahead and start, and then I'll follow up after her. Barbara.
Welcome.
Good evening. Hi. Thank you so much for the opportunity to be here again. Barbara Zektik with Alexander and Cleaver. It's a real pleasure for us to represent the city of Gaithersburg. I'll talk a little bit about your 4 priorities to get us started. First, we'll talk about the police station. As you know, the governor included $2 million in his proposed capital budget in order to provide funding for Gaithersburg's new police station, which I know you're planning on breaking ground on in the near future. We have heard a little bit of scuttlebutt about people trying to tap into the funds for other resources. I think this comes from a number of different reasons. One thing, just generally speaking about the budget this year that is important to remember is this is one of the first years in a long time we haven't had a BRFA. That's a Budget Reconciliation and Financing Act. This is the bill that the governor usually puts in along with his operating budget in order to change provisions of the laws in order to make sure the budget works. We've had one of these, I think, every year for the last decade, and this is the first year in a long time we haven't had one. This is where members of the General Assembly do a lot of their gains, right? This is where they do a lot of shifting. Without that opportunity, that only leaves the capital budget because they have very limited ability in their operating budget. So I'm just giving you that background so you know when we hear a lot of rumors about people tapping into the capital budget, the reason we're hearing more of those rumors this year than we have in the past is because it's really their only playground right now, for lack of a better word. So that said, we have $2 million in the governor's proposed budget. We have heard rumblings on the Senate side about potentially limiting that to $1 million in the next fiscal year and doing an additional $1 million in the following fiscal year, which would be FY 2021. That is, as we've heard, the worst case scenario with what might happen with this money. Of course, anything can happen at any time. We don't know until it's all over. But that is looking like, at this time, our worst case scenario. And if it does look like it's going to move forward in that regard, we're going to work hard to make sure there's a prior authorization put into the capital budget, which essentially just puts it in writing that we're planning on seeing this money in out years. It can always be futzed with in out years, as they always do, but that at least gives us a little bit of assurance that we have in writing that that is the plan moving forward. And again, I really do think that's the worst case scenario. Rumblings on the House side so far has been we're all in for the $2 million, so we'll wait and we'll see what happens with this.
Even if it's 1 and 1, it would still be a big win for the city.
Wonderful, wonderful, great.
Not that of course we want all the 2. I don't want to.
Of course.
I don't want your motivation to diminish.
Of course. And we'll continue to stay on our friends on both the House and Senate side to fight for that $2 million now.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. We worked on a bill to allow Gaithersburg the authority to set a hotel tax, even on hotels with units that have 10 or less rooms. So hotels with 10 or less units. This was a very small tweak in the municipal hotel tax law, and it really only impacted Gaithersburg, Rockville, and in Somerset County, Crisfield, and Princess Anne. That bill has already passed through the House. No amendments. It flew right through. It was our friend Delegate Polakovich's car's first bill, and she was very happy to do that for you, and we're very excited to see that is done. The Senate hearing, which will be sponsor only, the bill is sponsored by Budget and Tax Chair Nancy King. She has the hearing on Friday. That hearing will be sponsor only. There's no reason not to expect this bill to fly through the Senate as well.
Good news.
So that's looking good. Small cells. I know that's a big issue for you all. Some of you sat through some very long and tedious hearings last week. They were there pretty much all night. I know that was very much appreciated. We haven't seen any movement so far on these bills. So right now there are 2 bills that are in the House and in the Senate. One of them is the industry bill, which would be very bad for you, and one is the local government bill, which would be good for you.
Essentially good versus evil. It's very
And it's been amazing seeing the hearings play out. It's been really entertaining. And there's also a very strong possibility that no one passes anything on this session. There's a lot of fatigue.
That would be good for us.
Which is good, right.
Yes.
There's a lot of fatigue on this issue. They did deal with it last session. There was a lot of feelings that we were all going to come to the table this session and have this glorious agreement. That did not happen. People are a little frustrated, I think, with local governments as well as with the industry, both. So far, no subcommittee has taken up the bill. On the House side, the applicable subcommittee is meeting tomorrow. It's not on their agenda. We know there's been no conversations between the House and Senate so far that we've heard about what either chamber is going to do. Something could always happen, but at this point, it just looks like people are fatigued on the issue, and it might just go away. It is important to note on this issue that the sponsor of the good bill, Delegate Lisanti from Harford County, did recently come under censure from the General Assembly, and she has been removed from all of her committees. So moving forward, we will be contacting other subcommittee members that are friends of ours to continue fighting the fight on behalf of local governments, and I don't see that being an issue.
Great.
School construction. Don't have a lot to report on that right now. So the House and the Senate had their hearings on all the schools construction bills last week. There's been a lot of talk that they plan to do something. They plan to put more money in the capital budget for school construction than they have in the past. Where they're going to get this money, it remains to be seen. We anticipate this week the Bureau of Revenue estimates reporting that there's going to be a revenue write-down. So the Bureau of Revenue estimates provides an estimate on revenues this week in March every year. It's the final estimation of revenues that comes out before they finalize the budget. Because of the government shutdown, the federal government shutdown, and sluggish sales taxes, we're expecting to come back with a write-down on available funds for the next fiscal year. And that could be not really significant amount like 50 million. It could be 200 million, which would be a little more significant, and we would see more activity there. So I think a lot of what's going to happen in school construction in somewhat is dependent on what happens with that revenue write-down that will come out this week. In any event, both parties seem to want to do something on school construction. The governor, his proposal depends on taking funds from the Education Trust Fund. General Assembly leadership is more looking at other financing options, like having the Stadium Authority issue revenue bonds that are backed by casino proceeds or something like that. So where the money is going to come from, if we see additional money there, that all remains to be seen. Do you have any questions for me?
I had a question about the BRFA.
Mm-hmm.
Why isn't the BRFA in this year's budget?
So, the second chapter of the story, which is really interesting, and I'm sorry I forgot to mention it earlier, he didn't originally put in a governor-sponsored BRFA because originally it looked like a pretty easy budget year, and he just didn't see the need for it. And frankly, if he can do an operating budget without changing terms of existing law in order to make it balanced, some fiscal folks would say that's a better approach. Politically, he wouldn't want to do it because, as I said, this gives leeway for members to play around more so than he would have otherwise. Now, that said, last week, Appropriations Chair McIntosh issued her own BRFA.
Oh, okay.
I've never seen anything like it before.
This is really inside baseball.
Fascinating, and it's awesome. So,
I'm excited about that too, but I don't know how many people watching this are.
I'm glad we both get excited about this. Never seen anything like that before. We weren't even sure if she could do it. She did it. It's done. I guess it can be done. I don't know why it wouldn't be able to be done, frankly, but traditionally the governor usually puts it in. I know she did it because they're anticipating this revenue write-down, and they're going to want a little bit more flexibility. So we'll see.
Did you have another?
Yes.
Marianne? Go
You
ahead.
mentioned the education trust fund. Is that the same as the lockbox?
Yes.
Okay.
Mhm.
Alright. Do we know how much money is available, potential for the state?
So I would want to follow up with you on that
Okay.
exact numbers.
Ryan.
I just had a process question. Does the capital budget, like other legislation, if different versions are passed in the two houses, go to a conference committee?
That's right. Yes.
So even if the Senate decided to do something a little different with the $2 million in the governor's budget, there might be another opportunity at the conference committee to work with them on that.
And we've been talking to members on the House side that we believe will be on that conference committee to get prepped for that conversation.
Great.
Exactly.
Excellent. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I bug Monica every day about that money. So, and I know you hear, Barbara, I know you hear about it from Monica.
We know. No,
Yeah.
we're watching it closely. We
Great.
know.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next, we're going to move on
I just
to.
wanna do
Oh, go
one
ahead,
thing.
please,
Yeah.
please.
I just wanted to update you, and actually it's very timely since we're doing Hunger Awareness Month. I spoke to the head of MANA, and we are really excited and pleased and honored to support their bond bill
Great.
for $150,000 for a walk-in freezer that is set to help more than 10,000 more insecure Marylanders. As you stated, several of those people live right here in Gaithersburg, and we're honored that they asked us. Their hearing is on Monday. So the city will be providing some testimony in support of this very worthwhile project.
Great. A number of us were present when
It's amazing work.
MANA brought up the idea of our support for their bond bill. We're very happy to support
And
it.
since we don't have one of our own this year, we're happy to support theirs.
Absolutely. Thank you, Monica.
All right, thanks.
Next, we're going to move on to public comments, and this is the time the mayor and council like to hear from anybody on any topic, because we have no public hearings tonight. We ask that you keep your comments no more than 3 minutes. State your name and address or neighborhood for the record. When your time's down to 30 seconds, the timer will beep and turn yellow. When your time's up, it will beep and turn red. Please note that if you have testimony that goes longer than 3 minutes, we're glad to accept any testimony via email, and will be considered just like any oral testimony. Who'd like to be our first speaker? Come on up. Anybody else who's here to speak, please feel free to line up, and we'll take you next.
Good evening. My name is Sheldon Pine. I reside at 35 Treeworthy in our city. Preface this by saying I'm a 1981 graduate of Yale Law School and clerk for the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals, and have practiced regulatory law for 35 years since graduating from law school. That's a preface to say I want to talk about the cell tower regulations. I want to take a few valuable seconds to thank Lynn and Frank and Dennis somewhere, because I think they've done an extraordinary job with a very complex subject and have produced very nuanced and very complex regulations. Notwithstanding that, there's been a lot of contest about what the regulations should say in a whole variety of subject matters. I gave a written statement, which is 5 single-spaced pages that deals strictly with the law. I don't have enough time to talk about that, but I want to make 3 quick legal points, and I'm broadly supportive of the regulations as proposed. First, the zoning power, really is the power to preserve the character of the community with a concomitant obligation to heed the wishes of the community. That's what we're talking about when we talk about zoning. It's a quintessential power of local government. As the Supreme Court said, the power to zone and control land use is undoubtedly broad, and its proper exercise is an essential aspect of achieving a satisfactory quality of life in both urban and rural communities. That's a famous zoning case called Mount Shad. Specifically, is the second point I'd like to make relating to the cell tower zoning issue. It's definitively the law of the United States Court of Appeals for the 4th Circuit, which governs Maryland and the contiguous states, definitively the law that preserving the character of the community and heeding the legitimate wishes of the community with respect to the location of zoning cell towers are legitimate aspects of the municipal zoning process, in addition to being core zoning values. Nothing in any FCC regulation, short of an action by the city, that actually totally prohibits cell tower service can override the power of the city to zone. And finally, and that's further to amplify this point, and we see this in the controversy over the regulations with two of the cell tower companies.
30 seconds.
Gotcha. Contrary to what they've said, refusing to allow the placement of cell towers in a way that maximizes cell tower company returns and minimizes their costs, which is what they want, is not an effective prohibition of service. A violation of law would only occur if there is an actual prohibition of service, an effective prohibition of all service where a community is already served. There are 3 recent Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals cases that hold that, and nothing has changed that piece of the law.
Thank you very much. And again, feel free to submit anything more to us in writing. Or just email it to us. Come on up.
Hard copies.
Oh, yeah.
That's fine, that's fine. If you brought copies, that's fine. Come on up.
Hello, my name is Stephen Rayfield, and I'm here to, I live at Treeworthy Road, number 37, and I've been engaging in several conversations with regarding the cell towers. On January 22nd, I and several other citizens met with Dennis, and we had a lengthy discussion. I certainly appreciate his attention to our concerns. And what I'd like to do is hand in some of my notes from that meeting, and there were 2 areas that I just wanted to highlight. One is the inspection frequency, which had been once a year, has been moved to once every 3 years. And I believe that the people and the community would be better served with not necessarily a hard requirement to inspect once a year, but with the permission to do so, along with any other time events warrant, such as a tower is hit by a lightning strike or something like that. The second is that the application that is submitted should most likely include a statement as to the maximum power that will be used to service each individual tower that's put up. This would avoid a situation where they say, well, they're going to rent it to 4, and then they end up with 6 service providers and they go to much higher power. This gets involved with the issue having to do with there is no standard for the cumulative effects that, of RF. So by knowing that, let's say they can only have 5 kilowatts or some number like that, whatever the correct number is, it puts an upper bound on the power that's consumed by a cell tower. They're submitted as constructive changes in the spirit that we certainly appreciate the work that you've done on our behalf. Thank you.
Doris, come on up, please.
Hi, my name is Robert Janku. I live in Wesley, just outside of the town of Gaithersburg. The activists that I've been getting email from don't think the good bill is really that good. We feel it locks in the current FCC rules into Maryland law. So you wouldn't get any, you get all these hassles with, that's just, somebody needs to look in it a little more, I think. Okay, thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Can I just briefly address that, Mr.
Go
Mayor?
ahead, please.
That's true.
I just want to say, and I don't know if our outside lobbying team is still here or not, but I think they would back me up on this when I say this, and I'll try to be careful about it, because there's a lot of strategy and sort of chess game playing that goes on in Annapolis, and sometimes in order to prevent a really, really bad thing from happening, you have to put forward some sort of alternative, even when you'd rather have nothing happen at all. So I'll just put that out there as food for thought. But I understand the point that was made by our last speaker.
Do we have any other speakers?
For the dog park?
Whatever you want to speak about, please.
Everyone come up, because I'm not that prepared. I think others are prepared.
All right, we're gonna go one at a time.
Oh, we all can't come up? 'Cause I don't even know.
Well, you can all line up.
I would prefer that. I think they're more prepared. So
You each get 3 minutes.
Follow me, but I just want to
Someone else can go before you, so you have some
Do you want me to
time.
go before you?
Good.
Okay.
Yes, come on up.
I'm not a great speaker, but I'm a Lakelands homeowner, and I just kind of wanted to.
We need you to state your name.
Oh, and
the
what I-
Lakelands is fine, but please state your name.
Cindy Brown, Lakelands homeowner.
Okay, thank you.
And I wanted to just kind of talk about Tony Tomasello's memorandum and the concerns. The first one was about the open play area. Nobody plays there, so I don't think if you build it, they're going to come. The only people on that land usually are the dogs and the owners. We have a big group, we meet there, we play. So as for the informal ownership, I don't really know what that means. But I guess my question is, how many times has the county come and taken back land that they've leased to the city? Is that something that really needs to be worried about, or can we deal with that if it happens down the road and the dog park already exists? The main thing I wanted to talk about was the environmental concerns. I showed the blurb to a landscape architect, and although he feels that they are legitimate concerns, he doesn't see that the land is really going to be a problem for those concerns because it is not sloping towards the lakes. It's not actually on top of the lakes. And really didn't think it would be close enough based on the serial photos that he was looking at, or the aerial photos, sorry. And I guess, we really want that park. It would be utilized on a regular basis. Parking would not be an issue, as there's plenty of parking on the street there, as well as the parking lot. The only time it might be an issue is when the synagogue is holding services, but the majority of us walk our dogs anyway, so we would be walking to the dog park, not driving there and parking. Others from maybe outside communities on 28 might be driving in, but there's plenty of parking. And I guess that's all I really want to add.
Thank you.
Hi, my name's Holly Starr. I'm a Lakelands resident, and I do live right, basically across the street on Main Street. And I'm just going to add to the parking. The side parking that would be closest to that area where the park is, I've never seen a car there. So where I live, I would be the most affected, and I'm not concerned about it in the least because I see lots of side parking all the way down 28 towards the police headquarters. And I've never seen cars there. There may be a random car here and there, but there is local, we would all walk, as was just stated. I'm very, very strongly in support of it. I feel like it's a safety issue for our pets. They are four-legged children to me that don't have a safe place to play. But the only other option we have is the fields where they're not supposed to be. So unfortunately, my dog needs his exercise, and he has Jack Russell in him, so he likes to run. And he runs in that field, and if he leaves a mess, I want to clean it up, but it's so far away, and I spend hours looking for it, and I don't want to leave it there for the children. This way, we're all right there. We could see where it is. We can clean it up, and I think the rest of the neighborhood would be cleaner because there would be less dog mess because they'd all be in one designated area, in my opinion. I think the majority of our neighbors are very much for it, and I'm here to ask if it could be considered for even a small space just for our pets.
Thank you. Thank you. Any other speakers, please?
Pardon me, I'll be reading part of mostly. I'm Karen Norris, and good evening, Mr. Mayor, City Council members, and Mr. Tomasello. I'm, as I said, Karen Norris of the Kentlands Board of Trustees. It is a pleasure to attend tonight to request your support of the dog park on the leased Edison Park property. I also want to thank Tony Tomasello, City Manager, who's been great to work with. He has graciously responded to our requests for guidance, and I further appreciate his seeking guidance from the Mayor and the City Council tonight, and feel that together we can come to the right solution for what's best of the park. And while this request includes the Kentlands, it also includes the Lakelands and over 40 other neighborhoods. More than 700 people took a survey, with 85% of whom in favor of a dog park. I'd like to share some background. In 2017, the Kentlands Board received several requests for a dog park. There was no land available in the Kentlands or the Lakelands. In January and February 2018, the Kentlands Board unanimously approved investigating other options and engaging with the city and the county. By March of 2018, the Lakelands Board voted unanimously to work with us. Concurrently, the city entered into a 20-year lease agreement for the Edison Park site. Good news. In July of 2018, the county published an analyst report. The site may be considered for a new elementary school. The county requested no permanent structures. Mr. Jacob Sesker and more recently Mr. Sidney Katz of the county confirmed that a dog park would be an acceptable use of the land if the city so wished. So addressing the question of the structure. And while dog park would change the original plan for 1 acre, it would likely increase the overall use and enjoyment of the park that is walkable for so many, with easy access by car for others. The city did not identify a dog park in its initial plan, so there is an absence of funding for that purpose. There is funding, however, for the park, and Mr. Tomasello suggested we include a question on the dog park survey if citizens would help support the cost of that dog park, so you have some information in that regard. Mr. Tomasello also rightfully raised our awareness of possible pet waste runoff. I contacted the Money Branch Alliance and the Seneca Creek Watershed Partners, and some of them would actually use the dog park. They noted existing barriers such as Main Street and the parking lots that would reduce the potential for harm, but suggested that someone with experience walk the site to give informed judgment. And lastly, the unprecedented level of response to the dog park survey gave a couple folks some pause. Maybe there was something wrong with the survey. No, not at all. The survey is sound, approved, and every response for or against has been qualified. Mr. Hernandez will talk about the survey. Thank you so much for your consideration.
Thank you. Please.
Hello, my name is Jamil Hernandez from 215 Thaxton Street. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, City Council members, Mr. Tomasello, and City staff members. Thank you for the opportunity to address you and provide this brief statement in support of the dog park. I have included additional information in my statement. As Ms. Norris previously mentioned, I helped design the survey collection instrument. With my remarks, I am also including the full 2018 Dog Park Survey Report, which describes in detail the design of the survey, how responses were solicited, how the data was reported. The Kentland Citizens Assembly, the KCA, previously provided city staff a copy of the report along with the underlying raw data tables, so if needed, the city could do further analysis. Since my time is limited, I will summarize and state that the survey was well designed, vetted through multiple stakeholders such as the Kentlands Board, Lakelands Board, committees of the KCA Board, local residents, and several governmental stakeholders. It was advertised through multiple means, online and offline, properly conducted, and thoroughly reported. As noted in the briefing package for tonight's topic on the dog park, the KCA Board voted in favor of and will advocate for the dog park. I think it would be useful for the council to put the 700 responses and 80% plus support rate in the appropriate context. This is a remarkable, grassroots-led and supported initiative that extends beyond the Kentlands. Looking at potential comparators of responses to online surveys in the city, I found historical response rates for the biannual citywide citizen survey. The results from 2011 to 2017 show a low of 146 to a high of 394 online responses. The average is approximately less than half of the 2018 Dog Park survey response. Further, their city recently completed a virtual budget forum survey. This survey seemed like another apt comparison of online response rates. Staff write in their report to the City Council that the survey, quote, received 435 responses compared to 65 responses in fiscal year 19, unquote. In linking through the data of those 435 responses, question 1 states, quote, Gaithersburg's population has increased by about 7% since 2014, now at just under 70,000, and 14% since 2010. With that growth, is there anything Gaithersburg needs more of, unquote. one of the most provided answers to that questions were dog park related. Montgomery County Parks has recently announced a group of surveys to assess the potential for additional dog park locations. The county survey has not yet closed, so I do not have response data. However, it is instructive to see that in the up-county section of that survey, the county lists Edison Park as a study area for potential future dog parks. In conclusion, City Council members, I ask that you provide staff with appropriate guidance that reflects the broad-based support and enthusiasm that the community has in support of the dog park on Edison Park site. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Hello, I'm Asya Smith from the Kentlands. I'm here both as a member of the Kentlands Board of Trustees and a private citizen and a dog owner. I'm here in support of the Edison Park property, and I thank you for the opportunity to speak to you. A lot of our residents, the Gaithersburg residents, have expressed an interest in having a dog park within walking distance of their homes in the Kentlands and Lakelands neighborhoods of the city of Gaithersburg. I am lucky enough to have a fenced-in yard for my dogs, but most of my neighbors are not. The properties there are rather small. In the agenda for the meeting today, Mr. Tomasello has provided a list of concerns with the request to use a portion of the currently unused Edison Park property for a dog park. I would like to very briefly address them all. On the first concern, we respectively disagree with the statement that the dog park is not in keeping with new urbanism. I spoke with the town architect of the Kentlands, Marina Corey, of the DPZ yesterday, and her opinion is that a dog park, similar to any other single use, such as a playground, within walking distance most certainly fits within the new urbanist community principles. With us requesting that an acre of the land is dedicated to a dog park, there's close to 4 acres left for open play. And whatever that land is used for, it will be single purpose. Whether it's a volleyball court or playground or a dog park, it's going to be a subset of the population that's going to use it. As a parent, when my kids were really young, we heavily used the playground equipment. We're no longer frequent visitors there, but I still support it because there is a different group of the population that is using it right now. On the second concern about constituents claiming informal ownership, that would be true of venues of the facility. We shouldn't let potential fear of the future, like somebody, we need to return the land and people will get upset if we have to give it back, prevent us from doing what the community wants and needs now. If we have to give it back in 10 years, we'll deal with it. But whatever happens to the land, somebody will be upset. Somebody using it will be upset if an amenity goes away. I can guarantee you that if you were to put a volleyball court there, you will have really upset people who use it daily. On the third concern, the topography of the site appears to be well suited to prevent possible runoffs. It is flagged, it's flanked on both sides by structures. We believe a suitable solution to any potential environment concern can be readily applied to this site. I would note that the site is currently populated with geese and other wildlife that leave their deposits in our lakes all the time. It makes it really hard to walk around the lakes, actually, most of the year. We would be happy to work with the city to investigate solutions. The Muddy Branch Alliance and the Seneca Creek Watershed Partners can continue to provide valuable guidance. I really want to thank you for your time to consider the survey, the 700 people, of which 538 were dog owners, most of which are asking for a dog park within walking distance. About a third of the responders live in Lakelands, a third in Kentlands, and a third in the surrounding community. So we have a pretty wide representation. We already covered the parking. The external people can easily come in. It's at the edge of the community. Thank you very much. All of the dog owners pay city taxes and hopefully will pay their pet and licensing fees.
Thank you. Thank you.
Good evening. Thank you, City Council, for having us in to voice our opinions. I'm a resident, Jeffrey Studley, of the Lakelands. I live right across the street from Lakelands Park. I regularly see people letting their dogs run free on the baseball field and the soccer field and various other locations that are city-owned properties, such as where the pavilion is in the Lakelands, or on the Lakelands property next to the basketball courts and the tennis courts. And I think if there was a dedicated spot for people to bring their dogs, it would alleviate some of the waste problems that previous speakers spoke about, and would give people a very much wanted, and from my discussions with my fellow neighbors, you overwhelmingly supported new facet to the Lakelands and the Kentlands. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other speakers this evening?
Good evening. I'm Marion Juliet. I've been living at the Lakelands for the last 19 years. The last 6.5 years I've owned a dog, and so now I know what the problems are around our area. My dog, I cannot let her run free. I used to use the rundown, dilapidated tennis court. That was the only place she could run around, and it was great. That is now, the fence has gone, so it's no longer possible. But I also use the tennis courts at the school, which hardly ever is used by tennis players. The basketball courts is sometimes used, but that's school property, so I understand that we have nothing to do with that from the city's point of view. But I do want to strongly support the making of or providing a dog park for our dogs, because all the problems mentioned before are part of the fact that there is nothing where the dogs can run around free. We have lots of play courts for our children throughout Kentlands and Lakelands. But we have nothing for the animals, and as you probably know, there must be 80% of people who live in the area that have one or maybe even two dogs. I walk by their houses all the time and hear them barking, and so just to support Mr. Mayor, Tony, we worked together before. The fact from a resident of almost 20 years of the Lakelands that I'm in strong support of the park for the dogs. I even would say if there would be a willingness perhaps for people paying an annual fee to make sure that the park is maintained from the city as far as bags are concerned and trash cans cleaned up. I would suggest to look into that. If we needed to, we pay a fee for the dogs' permits, and to use the dog park could also perhaps provide support. Thank you.
Thank you. Anecdotally, I can say, you know, around election time, when everybody up here goes and knocks on doors in Kentlands and Lakelands, there's a large number of dogs. Clearly, there's a large number of dogs.
If the dogs could vote.
If they could vote, I don't know. I'd be scared. I don't. A lot of them don't like me, I think, but anyway.
It's the mark of a good politician if the dog likes you. Just saying.
Yeah, ouch. Any other speakers this evening? Not seeing any. Okay, we thank you all. We will take up this item a little bit later in the meeting, but we're going to move on to from the mayor and council and start with Councilmember Wu.
Good, Mr. Mayor. I want to hear the presentation on the dog park, so I'm not going to stand in between that.
Okay, we will move on to Councilmember Sesma.
All right. Well, for those of you who don't know, it's Women's History Month, so I hope you're celebrating that appropriately and observing the accomplishments of women in the history of the United States and the world. So since I have 3 daughters and a wife, it's important for me that we recognize that. So, and a granddaughter too. So let's see, I want to thank staff and my colleagues and at least one resident who came to our visioning exercise a week ago Saturday. I'm going to let Neil kind of review that a little bit more later, but I thought it was a great exercise and certainly gives us, it's something that I've been talking about for a while, but not to the scale that we actually did it. So I think we were able to find some agreement on how we should approach the future of Gaithersburg. So it was a nice opportunity to do that. On Thursday, February 21st, I was among a number of people delivering testimony in Annapolis on the small cell bills in front of the House Financial Matters Committee. Lynn Board was there as well. It was an interesting hearing. It was introduced by the sponsor of the bill, Delegate Davis, who actually gave a pretty outrageous introduction to the bill, basically exclaiming that there was a great need for this, and that municipal governments were standing in the way of progress in the state that was having an impact on local economies. A number of people who testified either for or against. I think what we really know is if you have a problem with cell service, it's not because you don't have 5G now, it's because you don't have 4G that's completely deployed within the community. So, and that industry can deploy now under the current regulations, and if you've got bad service, it's because they haven't done that. So that was just part of my testimony, but basically I emphasized the need for the importance for local government to maintain control over these regulations, and the fact that Gaithersburg has already had in place its regulations for the deployment of these systems in residential and urban neighborhoods, and that since we approved those regulations and ordinances, we haven't had a request for a proposal yet. So either the industry really doesn't know what they want, or they actually are biding their time waiting for the FCC and the state to kind of take away the rights of the municipal government in terms of regulating these things. So that was just part of my testimony. I think the worst part of it is that the testimony on the bill started around 3 o'clock, and it ended about 7:30. And we were in the very last panel to, so it actually ended up working out because I actually had the last word on the panel and during the hearing in terms of a formal people presenting. So I thought it went well, both Lynn and my testimony as well. So glad to give it. I know Lynn also testified when the Senate bill was introduced as well. So I think we have friends in the right places at this point. But we still need you, residents, and anybody else you know in the state that lives in a city or a town or a village or even a county to write to their delegates and senators to tell them about this. That preempting local government is not the approach to doing this. So we've shown that we can pass those regulations. We're ready to work with the industry to deploy this so that it doesn't impose burdens on the local community, but we need them to hear that and tell them that either no bill is the best approach, but if they're going to pass a bill, it should be the friendly bill. The bill that's friendly to municipalities.
The good and not the evil one.
The good and not the evil. Well, I wasn't going to use that word, but yeah, it comes down to that, okay? Want to congratulate Jimmy Frazier Bayard, my friend, who's very deserving of his Employee of the Quarter Award, and also as a homeowner who has big trees in their yard. I really appreciate the leaf collection crew and team. I know they're out there working hard. And sometimes I don't get my leaves out there in time to beat them, but but they manage to come back and get those. It's especially a struggle when we have wet weather. People have piled up leaves, and our crews still manage to get out there. But it was an extremely heavy year for leaves. So it's one of the things that we brag about when we talk to other cities about what Gaithersburg does for its residents. So again, I want to congratulate that team as well. So I think that's it.
Thanks, Mike. Ryan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening again, everyone. First, a formal announcement, a notice of a public meeting. Notice to the general public is hereby given that prior to submitting the Community Development Block Grant, or CDBG, Annual Action Plan to the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, or HUD, the city will hold 3 community meetings at various locations on the following dates. 12 noon on Wednesday, March 20th at City Hall, 31 South Summit Avenue in the upstairs gallery. 6 o'clock p.m. on Wednesday, March 20th at the Casey Community Center, located at 810 South Frederick Avenue. And 6 o'clock p.m. on Thursday, March 21st at the Activity Center at Borer Park, located at 506 South Frederick Avenue. These meetings are being held to introduce the CDBG program for the period July 1st, 2019 through June 30th of 2020. Staff will identify the expected level of funding in the upcoming year, describe the overall goals of the CDBG program, discuss types of projects eligible for funding, and accept all comments related to the program. Staff will also review the requirements of affirmatively furthering fair housing in the city. A Spanish-speaking interpreter will be available, and upon request, sign language interpreters and other auxiliary aids will be available. Advance notice of at least 48 hours is requested for interpreters or aids. These facilities all meet the requirements for handicapped accessibility. For information on this and all other matters related to community development block grant funds, contact Louise Kaufman by email at louise.kaufman@gaithersburgmd.gov or by phone at 240-805-1022. Couple of quick announcements about some activities and events that several of us attended over the last couple of weeks since our last formal meeting. First, the Montgomery County chapter of the Maryland Municipal League, which is made up of all of the cities and towns in Montgomery County, had our annual meet and confer session with the county executive. This was our first annual session with new executive Mark Elrich. Thought it was a very productive discussion, and I will add, since many of the folks here in the audience tonight we're here to talk about the small cell facilities, Mark is an extremely strong advocate for local government control and against preemption by the state and federal governments. So if you haven't reached out to him yet and you're somebody who wants to continue advocating on this issue, he has been a strong ally of the city and of the Maryland Municipal League on this issue. He's been in Annapolis a lot this session, and he also testified along with Mike on that bill hearing as well.
He got to go first, though, so I had to wait 3 hours.
Well, he opened it up, and then you batted cleanup, so it was a good team. We also had the opportunity to talk to Mark about the issue of tax duplication, which is kind of an arcane issue that we've been talking about for many, many years. And the gist of it is that people who live in municipalities pay a supplemental amount of property tax for municipalities to provide you with certain services. But you also pay the county property taxes the same as everybody else who lives in the county. And while someone else in the county may or may not be providing, say, for example, leaf pickup services, you're getting your leaf pickup services from the city. And yet you are subsidizing the county's provision of that service to other people outside of your municipal jurisdiction. And so the cities and towns have been working and negotiating with the county for many, many years to try and come up with a formula that's workable to either do some kind of set-off or some kind of tax rebate to account for this issue. As you might imagine, the county is reluctant to give up any of the money that it has in its own general fund to do this. But Mark comes from a municipal government background. He was a Tacoma Park city councilman for many years. And he understands this issue very well. And so I am cautiously optimistic that in the next couple of years, maybe we'll be able to make some traction on this issue after we've been discussing it and not really having any progress with the county for the last several years. But you all, as taxpayers in municipal and county government, should be aware of this, that you're essentially being taxed twice for a service you're only getting once. And we think the county should acknowledge that and do something about it. So stay tuned, and we'll continue to have those discussions. I'll echo what's already been said about our annual retreat/visioning exercise, which was different this year, as you've already heard. It was a very, very good all-day session last Saturday, or 2 Saturdays ago, and it really forced us to take a hard look at the long-term future of the city in a data-driven approach to see, what really are our assets and what are our challenges. And I'm sure Neil and others will talk more about it, but it's very eye-opening, and I think it will help us to sort of craft some of our land use policies and our other decisions as we go forward in the long term for the next 10, 20, 30 years. Had the opportunity to join a couple of my colleagues this past Friday at the Young Artists Award concert. I like to joke with the mayor that if you ever want to feel bad about yourself, go to this event, because you've got these incredible, unbelievably talented teenage kids getting up there on stage, like virtuosos with their instruments and their voices, and it's just really impressive and amazing, and a wonderful evening of performances to enjoy, as well as to acknowledge and honor the accomplishments of those kids and their music teachers and their parents. So happy to join all of them, and thanks to Asbury Methodist Village for hosting us at their venue this year. Coming up next week is the National League of Cities annual spring conference in Washington, D.C. A couple of us, I'm sure, will be attending some of their sessions. It's a good opportunity for us to network with municipal leaders from around the country, share ideas, steal good ideas, so we'll report back to you after that event. I also want to echo all the kudos to all the employees and the employee teams that were acknowledged tonight for their outstanding work. Thank you for all you do. And thanks to all of the nonprofit partners and everyone else who's been involved in the Hunger Awareness Month activities. So glad to see the city is doing something new and interesting. It's the first municipal government to be partnering with King Arthur Flour on this project. And it is amazing, Mayor, when you did your presentation to hear the statistics on food insecurity and hunger in the country and in our region. So it's something that, it's easy for a lot of us to take for granted, but we really need to remember that there are people out there struggling and we need to help. And then finally, because this is our last formal meeting before the event, I just wanted to remind everybody that we have our wonderful St. Patrick's Day Parade coming up, not this Saturday, but next Saturday at the Washingtonian Rio Center. And it's a great parade. Hopefully the weather will cooperate, and hope to see a lot of you out there. Thank you.
Thanks, Ryan. Neil.
All right, thank you, Mayor. Pardon me, I'm a little bit hoarse, which is why I've been drinking the hot water with lemon. So since my colleagues keep pointing at me to talk about the visioning exercise, I'll start with that.
It was your fault.
It's my fault. So for the last 4 years since I became a member of this council, I've been suggesting that we do something like this, and it took a lot of work and collaboration particularly with the planning staff to understand the context of this exercise to make it work. But basically, over the course of time, projects come before us for approval or disapproval, construction projects or whatever. And you can view each project as a standalone, do we need a dog park? Do we need an apartment building? Do we need a senior center? But what I was looking for is a context of what we're going to need 30 years from now and how we're going to put all the pieces together and what we're not necessarily going to need. So planning staff really did a great job of working with some outside consultants and setting the parameters to do a massive data gathering exercise, a lot of data coming from the Census Bureau and from other sources. And there were some really eye-opening data points. For example, we have a lot of jobs. We actually have more jobs in the city than we have workers, but only 8% of the people who work in the city live in the city. Most of the people who work here come from outside the city, typically from points north and beyond. And the people who live in the city who work in Rockville or points south from there. So that's kind of important because one of the things that the Transportation Planning Board has been advocating for is building more houses next to jobs so that people don't have a long commute, but it seems like people don't take advantage of that. So that's really an interesting data point, something to think about as we plan this going forward to determine what we need more of and what we don't need more of in the city. Another really interesting data point, it was startling how many more kids we have that are school age in the city, not being driven by construction, but a lot of them coming from existing neighborhoods. Huge influx of pre-K kids and elementary age kids in the city, much bigger percentage growth than we've seen in the county as a whole. So apparently people like going to school in Gaithersburg, but it's something we need to be aware of and something that we need to accommodate. And there were many, many other, it was an all-day discussion going through masses of data, and basically the result of that is somewhere out in the future, but the council and the mayor gave input to the city staff, and the city staff will come back with a series of recommendations based on what we saw and what we determined. So I think this is a really important exercise for making sure that as we go forward, we have the right mix of things to accommodate the future needs of the citizens of Gaithersburg. So I was very pleased by the exercise. I thought it was a very productive day and very interesting, especially for a data wonk like me. Let's see, we had a couple of weeks ago, had a really good meeting with a number of organizations to talk about ways to assist the local Hispanic small business community. It's kind of the first step in a series of exercises to try to build better bridges to other new immigrant communities. This was the first one where we talked to, and we brought in a group called Identity, which is more of a nonprofit for teens, but has also been working on some economic development projects. We brought in the Montgomery County EDC, the Economic Development Corporation, and they have some people that specialize in this community. Matthew Lee, who was also on the board of TEDCO, which is the state's fund for entrepreneurship, and a group called the Latino Economic Development Center, who I met through the Leadership Montgomery class that I'm going through this year. And it seemed like there were a lot of resources that each group wasn't aware of the other group's resources, which is why we wanted them all around the table. Our own economic development staff really set the table and brought everything together. And it looked like there's some really really good conversations that will come out of that, and hopefully we'll have further conversations with, as I said, our other immigrant communities, because as you probably have heard once or twice, Gaithersburg is the most diverse city in the country. We want to make sure that we're all in this together and not sitting in our own little pockets doing our own things. Real quick, had a great session. Thanks to the county executive and Shear Partners for pulling together a session where about 40 industry leaders from the biotech community were in the room. Mark Elrich, our new county executive, gave a little talk about his perspective on business and economic development and opened the floor to the CEOs of many of the biotech companies. I don't know if you're aware, but more than 50% of the biotech companies in Montgomery County are based here in Gaithersburg City. And that Montgomery County is, I think, the 4th largest cluster of biotechs in the U.S., moving up each year. It was 6th a few years ago, then 5th, and now 4th. So one of our goals strategically going forward is to make sure that we continue these great biotech jobs as we go forward and encourage that cluster so that we're not solely beholden to the federal government jobs going forward. We had a good session with the Economic and Business Development Committee where we talked about the Green Construction Code, which is kind of the next generation beyond the LEED code that we've been following. Wanted to make sure that everyone understood and was comfortable with the new proposed regulations. Thanks for the presentation, and I thought everyone came away feeling pretty good about moving forward. And finally, I attended the latest month's Transportation Planning Board meeting downtown in DC. I think the highlight of that meeting was a presentation about a research plan that WMATA is sponsoring to look at bus connections throughout the region. I was hoping that part of the program would be to see about realigning bus routes to make them more efficient, which is not part of it. It was more like determining who should be running which bus lines in order to make things work better fiscally. But it's still a step in the right direction because transit usage is decreasing and traffic congestion is increasing, and those are both the opposite of what should be going on, so we need to make things work better. Anyway, I've gone on longer than I usually do, so I'll cut it off at that point. Thank you.
Thanks, Neil. Lorianne.
Thank you, Mayor. I also want to thank our new and returning residents who were confirmed this evening to continue serving on our city board committees or commissions. We are always looking for talented volunteers, so if you know of anyone who's interested in serving on a committee, please spread the word and look online for additional information. Congrats again to city staff, Jimmy, and the LEAF team members for their tremendous work that they do for our city. I won't repeat about the meet and confer event or the visioning exercise or the bioindustry discussion. This Saturday, I had the pleasure of attending the Montgomery County Community Action Agency's Community Advocacy Institute's mock hearing. The Community Advocacy Institute is in its 3rd year. It's modeled after the county's Leadership Montgomery program, and it's a program that is available for low-income residents, and it's teaching them ways to become more empowered and giving them the skills to basically advocate on behalf of their community. After meeting all of the participants, this is the first year that we had over 25 participants, first class of all women, which is excellent given it's Women's History Month. And so all of them will be testifying during the upcoming budget hearing. And so I'll be sharing additional information as we get closer to that. What else? I also attended the Gaithersburg Super Vita Day. That is the volunteer income tax prep day. The program prepares taxes for free for households and individuals earning less than $55,000. The kickoff was on Saturday, and we had lots of resources available. Some of the banks who wanted to open up accounts for people who don't have a checking account or wanted to buy some bonds. So there's lots of information available, and tax preparation is ongoing. You don't need an appointment, so please inquire if you need some information. The environmental awards, next month, April, is Earth Month, and we have a lot of events scheduled throughout the city. Tomorrow is the deadline, so if you know of anyone who's doing good work in the environment or encouraging others to do great work, please send in your recommendations tomorrow before 5:00 p.m. And that's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Lorianne. Like Lorianne, I will not repeat everything that's been said, except I'll thank everybody for saying it. I wanted to bring up a couple of upcoming events. Two of them are for Friends of the Wells Robertson House, which is a nonprofit that raises money to help to assist the city in our Wells Robertson House program. They're having a fundraiser March 13th at IHOP. So if you go and eat at IHOP between 4 p.m. and 10 p.m., 20% of the proceeds is going to be donated to the Friends of the Wells Robertson House. And then the following month, on April 5th, they're having their annual event, the Spring Fling, celebrating the 30th anniversary of the Wells program, from 6 p.m. to 10 p.m. at the Gaithersburg Hilton. It is a $35 a person. There's food, music, dancing, and silent auction. It's a lot of fun, and if you want to register for that, the address is Shimmy Shake and Shop 2019.eventbrite.com. So you could probably also find it at the Friends of Wells website as well. And since we're just like 2.5 months away, I wanted to start my incessant carnival barkery about the Gaithersburg Book Festival that's coming up on May 18th. It will be our milestone 10th annual Gaithersburg Book Festival, where we bring in some of the very best authors on the planet to come, for all ages and all kinds of genres, to come speak about their work and sign books. Just a few of the authors this year: David Marinis, who's won a couple of Pulitzer Prizes for the Washington Post; Lorene Carey, who's really a legendary literary figure; Etan Thomas, who used to play with the Washington Wizards, has got a book about athletes and activism, which should be timely, interesting subject; Therese Ann Fowler, who wrote a book called Z about Zelda Fitzgerald, which was adapted into a miniseries that's on Amazon, I think. She's got a new book. I forget what the title is, but it's on the Book Festival website. Jeffrey Deaver, thriller author, wrote The Bone Collector, which was made into a movie with Denzel Washington and Angelina Jolie years ago. Ben Bradley Jr. has got a book about a particular county in Pennsylvania that swung the election for Trump. So we have politics and we got mystery, and I didn't even get into our children's and teen young adults. In future meetings, I'll tell you about those. But in the meantime, I will tell you GaithersburgBookFestival.org for all kinds of information. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter. The event is May 18th. It is free to attend, free to park. Our friends at Politics and Prose will be on site doing book sales, and there will be signings, and it's going to be incredible. Awesome day. So the book festival. And I will note that next week, our work session, rather than being here in this room, we're doing an off-site work session where we will be touring 704 Quince Orchard Road. Shear Partners, which owns the building, they acquired it in 2018 and converting the space to accommodate biotech companies, want to take us on a tour. The tour is open to the public on a first-come, first-served basis. And space is limited, pre-registration is required, and transportation will not be provided, but it's not that far, and there's plenty of parking there. Please contact Municipal Clerk Doris Stokes by Friday, March 8th, 2019 at 301-258-6310 for more information, or if you need accessibility accommodations to join us. We'll move on to From the City Manager.
Thanks, Mayor. I, as you know, still have a ways to go tonight later, so I'll keep it real short. Tonight will be Tom Lonergan's debut as Assistant City Manager. Thank you all for welcoming him to the management team.
Let's give him a round of applause. From economic development director to assistant city manager.
Yes.
Not assistant to the city manager.
Not.
No.
He's not the Dwight
We
Schrute
cannot
character.
do without City.
You don't bring coffee?
Go ahead,
I
Tony.
do remember when the same promotion was offered to me, that I was the new economics director for about another 10 years from the former mayor when he would introduce me. So we'll try and get it right with Tom.
Yes.
And I'm sure his report in half a second will be dazzling. So that is all I have tonight.
That's a high bar, Tom. Economic development update. It's going to be dazzling. Let's hear it.
Yeah, thank you very much for the opportunity, for allowing me to step into this role. I'm honored, and I look forward to continuing my work with all of you.
We are excited for you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I know you've got a long agenda ahead of you, so I will keep my comments brief. One other acknowledgement I want to make one more time. I want to thank Barbara Cruz for joining yet another committee here in the city or in the county. Barbara and I know each other for many years now from the Chamber of Commerce Board, and I was honored when she agreed to join yet another group to help things out here in the city. So I look forward to working with her.
Do we have a list of the other places that she's going to serve?
That would take the rest of the night, Mike, if we did that. So thank you for that. You've probably heard by now that the Lake Forest location of JCPenney will be closing their doors in 4 months. We're not entirely surprised by this. It's a national restructuring going on with the company. It's one of 18 or 19, I don't remember, that has been announced that it'll be closing. I'd like to remind that this is not the mall. JCPenney is one of 5 owners of 8 parcels at the mall. This is corporately owned. We will be working with their real estate team to figure out what's next for that disposal, because at some point we assume they will want to dispose of that asset. Right now, I just want to mention that the core of the mall, which is owned by a bank, they are actively looking to dispose of it. They're going through a bidding process, an invitation-only bidding process, soliciting potential buyers. Sharon Disk and I have fielded many, many inquiries over the last couple of weeks from potential buyers asking about market conditions, city regulations, and other information they would deem relevant as part of their due diligence. So I'm sure we'll be fielding those calls for several more weeks. We've also fielded some calls from representatives of the banks with some questions of their own. We'll keep you posted as that process plays out. We expect some decisions to be made either this month or next month. And finally, I want to mention that I was at ICSC today, not other conventions, at the National Harbor, the International Council of Shopping Centers, which is a retail group. They had their Mid-Atlantic Conference. We make an appearance every year because this is where retailers looking to do business or more business here in the Mid-Atlantic come, and we highlight why they want to do more here in the city. Today was a good day. Tomorrow's going to be even better. One-on-one meetings with certain retailers as well as some regional shopping centers that have some interest in things going on here in the city. So I'll keep you posted. But prior to going to this meeting, it struck us that site selection is one of those areas that people hear about but the public doesn't know much about. There's a lot that goes into where retailers decide they're going to go, from incomes to population to traffic counts. It's as much science as it is art. Sharon Disk and I are in the process of putting together a community event where we will invite in some folks and give a better idea of what really goes into decisions by some retailers and where they locate. So I'll bring you information on that as soon as that comes together. Lastly and finally, a reminder, a week from Wednesday on the 13th, we, the city, together with the Maryland Women's Business Center, are co-sponsoring a networking event at Launch Workplaces at Rio. It is called Managing a Women-Owned Business. The event will include a panel of local female entrepreneurs. Lots of good discussion on the challenges and joys of owning business. If you're interested in joining this group, please let me know, the Office of Economic Development, or you can join through the Maryland Women's Business Center website. That was long. I'm sorry.
It was perfectly fine. It was dazzling, though. Well done.
Thank you.
Okay, just what we were looking for.
I feel bedazzled.
Yes. Next, we have ordinances, resolutions, and regulations. I'd like to invite Sean Stevens from our Public Works Department to lead us in a discussion about a contract to purchase 5 city fleet vehicles.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. The resolution before you tonight is to authorize the city manager to enter into a contract to purchase 5 Public Works fleet vehicles consisting of 3 pickup trucks with plows and salters, 1 utility body truck with plow and with plow and liftgate, and 1 crew cab pickup truck with a plow and salter. The 5 units that are being replaced are approaching the end of their useful service life, and due to their age, condition, mileage, and/or reliability, were scheduled and approved for replacement in the FY19 Asset Replacement Fund. Once these new units are ready for service, the existing units will be sold at public auction. The Department of Public Works would like to utilize State of Maryland contract in purchasing these vehicles. This contract was competitively bid by the State of Maryland and satisfies all requirements of the city's procurement policy. Staff received a quote from the contract holder, Apple Ford Incorporated, based on the state contract in the amount of $260,143 for the 5 equipped vehicles. Staff also obtained check prices which verified the state contract is in the best value for the city of Gaithersburg. Do you have any questions for me?
Thanks, Sean. Any questions, comments?
I think our leaf crew will be happy to see these new trucks come in, so.
You want to move the resolution?
I'll move the resolution.
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, carries 5-0. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Sean.
Okay, next we have Rob Emard from our planning department to talk about introduction to for our electrical code.
Thank you.
I guess that's the easiest way to say that.
Yes, sure. Good evening. I'm here to introduce an ordinance to repeal and reenact with amendments Chapter 7 of the City Code entitled Electricity, so as to adopt the 2017 National Electric Code, which is also referred to as NFPA 70. Just as some quick background, the Mayor and City Council approved the last update to Chapter 7 of the City Code on September 6, 2016. This ordinance will repeal and reenact Chapter 7 to adopt the newest version of the 2017 Electrical Code developed by the National Fire Protection Association. The recommended modifications are consistent with the existing Chapter 7 language and city policies. There'll be a detailed discussion to occur at the anticipated public hearing on April 1st.
So just to clarify for the public's sake, we will, if we do introduce tonight, which I expect we will have a public hearing. But essentially, this is to keep our code consistent with the international regulations.
It is. Typically, the code updates every 3 years. It takes jurisdictions about a year after that date on that code to update and adopt and amend those. So that's where we are in the case, and we like to keep up to date with our codes.
Great. Any questions, comments?
Move introduction.
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, carries 5-0. And you are back for the next item.
I am indeed. All right, this one's a little longer. Bear with me, please. This is an introduction of an ordinance to repeal and reenact with amendments Chapter 5 of the City Code entitled Building. Articles 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, Sections 5 through, Sections 5.2 through 5-12, and adding Articles 7 through 11, and adopt, by reference with modifications, the following 2018 codes: the International Building Code, the International Residential Code, the International Existing Building Code, the International Green Construction Code, the International Mechanical Code, the International Energy Conservation Code, the International Plumbing Code, the International Fuel Gas Code, the International Swimming Pool and Spa Code, the Maryland Accessibility Code, which is also the ADA 2010 code, and additional fire safety requirements for certain multifamily residential structures. As a quick background, the Mayor and City Council approved the last update to Chapter 5 of the City Code on September 6, 2016. This ordinance will repeal and reenact Chapter 5 to adopt the newest version of the 2018 International Codes developed by the International Code Council. The recommended modifications are consistent with the existing Chapter 5 language and city policies, and again, a detailed discussion would occur at the anticipated public hearing on April 1st.
Great. Thank you, Rob. Questions, comments?
I'll make a comment, I guess. I think one of the things we've been very proud of in the city is our green building ordinance and code. This is, I guess this is going to enact that, but the major change would be the International Green Construction Code and the Energy Conservation Code basically are going to replace the LEED standards that we had used before, right? Is that correct?
It's Yes, correct, in the sense that the International Green Construction Code would replace our LEED requirement. The International Energy Conservation Code has already been on the books here in the city for years since it came out.
So, I mean, you know, I know a lot of people are aware of LEED who've been paying attention. We bragged about it as well, but I think we talked about it when this was first introduced, Green Building Ordinance was introduced, that we would use LEED as our standard until something better came along, and I'm glad to see that perhaps something better has come along here in terms of green building.
I believe something better has come along. That's why I'm asking to adopt the 2018 International Green Construction Code.
Great.
So not sure if this is a question for here or something to be covered when we have the hearing, but how do what's being adopted here compare to what's in place in the county?
So currently the county has, and I can go into further detail next month, but I can give you something brief. Montgomery County currently has the 2012 International Green Construction Code as one of its options to meet sustainability within the county. They just enacted that about 1.5 years ago.
Are they looking to move to the 18 standards, or
we're ahead of them?
We're two generations ahead of them.
Yeah.
As far as
we don't want to go back to where they are.
Right.
If that's
as far as where they are, I'm not sure as far as their sustainability. For them actually adopting the 2018 codes, they're not even close yet. They're looking at October as potential for adopting the 18s, and I'm not positive on as far as their sustainability.
Okay,
stuff.
so just when we get to hearing, I'd be interested in hearing about, my primary concern is cross-jurisdictional compatibility.
Sure.
Thanks.
Well, I'll move the introduction.
Okay.
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Carries 5-0. Thank you, Rob.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Rob.
Okay, Dennis and Frank. We are going to talk about amendments to our small cell regulations. And Giovanni.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council members. Tonight we're here to present to you the revised regulations for adoption regarding the right-of-way regulations. Most of the regulation revisions focused on Section 3, which is the additional regulations applicable to the wireless facilities. Just to give you a quick briefing on where we were at earlier or later last year and where we're at today. The item was introduced on December 17th of 2018. It was advertised for a public hearing on December 18th. That public hearing was held on January 7th of 2019. We closed the official record on February 11th of 2019. The city had 19 items entered into the public record, and those are attached in your packet of information. Staff has also provided a commented version of the proposed regulations for the council's review, which identifies some of the changes that we made since the introduction. I'm happy to cover those if you'd like me to, or we can move directly into comments. Again, as the mayor noted, we are joined tonight by outside counsel Joe Van Eaton of Best Beskin Krieger.
Yeah, if you could give us an overview of the updates here.
So the changes since the introduction were we made some modifications to the mid-wire base station facilities, clarifying the volume, how the volume is calculated, and also kind of the locations. Those are on pages 3 and 11. We also made some changes to the inspection report requirements, requiring a full written report with certification. That's on page 29. Minor modifications to include at a minimum on page 48. Clarifications regarding undergrounding of facilities on page 51. Correction of a reference on page 52. Clarifications regarding undergrounding of facilities. You'll see this is a common theme. That was one of the items that we heard from the council feedback and also the public feedback on page 53.
Dennis, I know that when we met the last time, when you referred to the underground, you said that we could only, the companies can only do underground where there's already underground. Is that still the case?
The way the regulations are currently worded is the city is looking for the companies to look at undergrounding as the first alternative.
Okay.
And then as the second alternative would be inside the pole, which would be difficult in some locations because they're wood poles as opposed to metal poles. And then the third location would be on the exterior of a pole. So it's kind of looking at all three of those in every case, whether that would be in undergrounded areas or above grounded areas.
But prioritizing underground as much as possible.
In the sense, we ask them to look at that first, and if they can't achieve that, they have to explain why. And the same thing applies to being inside the pole. They have to explain why that's not achievable.
Thank you.
And then there were a few more clarifications regarding kind of support structures and color. And those were in a couple sections. Again, some of these are repeated because of we have investor-owned poles and we have city-owned poles. Those were on page 56. Again, clarification of underground equipment on page 66. Correction of dimensions on page 67. Clarification of the co-location facilities on page 68. And then modifications again with regard to color. I'm trying to make sure they're complementary in terms of wording on page 69. A revision of the date for applications, where we'd start to look at them on a case-by-case basis on page 76. Then there was just a minor typographical revision on page 78. And those are all the modifications we made since the introduction. There were numerous other ones that were made working with the small cell providers and also public comment that we had received prior to that date.
Thank you, Dennis. Questions, comments?
So, Dennis, we've been talking about and working on trying to get together with that vendor of the equipment to see what the actual size of the equipment is as opposed to the very large sizes that we've received from industry that are included here. Assuming that the real world is different than what we've seen so far, what's the process of coming back and revising these numbers to make them less onerous?
So it would be very similar to what we have done in this process. Again, the original right-of-way regulations were adopted over a year ago, and these are actually revisions to those regulations. We would bring them forth to the mayor and city council. At that time, the mayor and city council could choose whether they wanted to hold a public hearing or not. In actuality, they could approve the regulations that are being proposed at that meeting if they so choose to, or they could hold a public hearing, and that would kind of lengthen the process because we have advertising requirements and closing of the record requirements.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Or would someone like to move the
I had a question about the dimensions. What were were there any changes to the proposed dimensions?
From the original one, we went from, in terms of exterior equipment, to 12 cubic feet.
Oh.
And that is a pretty significant size change.
It is.
And then 16 cubic feet for ground-mounted equipment.
Do we know what sizes are being proposed at the state level? Because someone told me that at the state level they were looking at 22 cubic feet, and not, I mean, we thought going up to 12 was a lot.
They are looking at, I think, 28 cubic feet, actually, from the industry standards.
So
you're just going to build city blocks for equipment at some point? I mean,
again, part of it has to do with what provider is looking at installing equipment. Some of the individual providers, such as AT&T, don't need as much space because they're doing one individual cell node by itself. Other industry providers, such as Crown Castle, tend to want to consolidate their facilities, and so those larger size requirements would allow them to install up to 3 or 4 carriers within one of their base nodes.
Can we apply the building construction code to large structures like this?
We actually do. There's a, if they're going to mount them on a pole or if they're going to change the pole, there are structural requirements that they have to meet. They have to prove through engineering that they can actually sustain those type of additional loads.
But 22 or 28 cubic feet is a pretty enormous structure.
16 feet is
something that would go in the right of way. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, and again, we're not proposing 28. We're
no,
at 12.
I know we're not, but if that's...
We're at 12 and 16,
right,
so...
Right. Okay.
Someone want to move the regulations?
I'll move the regulations.
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Lorian?
Nay.
Nay, okay.
Sorry.
Okay, carries 4-1 with Councilmember Sales voting against. Thank you, guys. Next is.
I think everybody's just going to stay up for
Yep.
these.
Yes. You guys are back. Okay. Go ahead, Dennis.
The second item we have
The
is
fees.
a resolution updating the fee schedule related to rights-of-way applications. We're actually proposing one change to the fee schedule, and it's related to the regulations we just proposed and you approved. It's a revision on page 13. We are actually increasing the fee based upon FCC regulations. We are going from $80 to $100 for these types of applications within the right-of-way for small cell facilities.
Okay, any questions or comments?
The only comment I have is wondering why we had to reprint the schedule of every fee for everything else in the city as part of this. It made the packet is large as it is, but it seemed a little excessive when we're just changing on one page.
We do that because we replace the entire fee schedule, and so we have to produce the entire fee schedule. It actually is simpler from a staff perspective than trying to change one little portion of it, so we can re-adopt the entire fee schedule. And we have to show that what we're actually changing.
Well, maybe a note at the beginning saying, only look at this one page would be helpful.
So, can I ask, so the FCC's direction sets a cap of $100 for an application fee?
Correct.
Okay. So even though we're, the silver lining here, I guess, is that we're able to increase our application fee because it wasn't actually already at the maximum cap that the FCC is allowed, we wouldn't be able to increase it beyond $100 ever in the future unless some legal challenge to the FCC order succeeded, for example.
Correct.
Okay.
And we will be losing other fees that are set within the FCC regulation.
Right.
So
Yeah.
This will not compensate for that.
Yeah, I just don't want to leave anybody with the impression that, oh, this is great, because of the FCC, we can increase the fee. No, not exactly. There's a much greater context here.
And even with the increase in this fee, it'll probably still be a net loss of what we had proposed before or have existing.
So in comparison to the other utilities that use the right-of-way, how does this compare?
These are all equal now.
They're all
We have to
equal.
treat everybody equally, so
Right.
that's one of the other reasons we increased the fee to $100.
Okay.
So would someone like to move the resolution?
I'll move it.
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, carries 5-0. Thank you very much.
Thanks. And now what we've all been waiting for.
Staff guidance, Tony Tomasello, let's talk about dog parks.
Thank you, Mayor. Prepared to talk about dog parks. First of all, I just want to thank everybody for coming out. Everyone's really been, very respectful and cordial, and I appreciate that.
Can I just follow up with one of the questions that came up during testimony?
Sure.
Has there been a similar instance with county property that they leased it to us for a long period of time and then took it back? Do you remember that happening?
I don't recall ever leasing any property from the county.
Okay.
They make it quite clear in the lease that they can take it back.
Yeah. No, I know, I get
Pretty
that.
quickly.
I just didn't
They
know
want
if there
to.
was any precedent for how this
No.
has happened in the past. And if you don't know,
We actually own the ground under the little daycare center on West Diamond as you go out of town. You've probably passed 1 billion times. And we lease the property to the county, and they subsequently lease it to the daycare center. That's the only thing remotely similar.
Okay.
And that's the other direction.
Yeah.
So
nothing really analogous.
yeah, it usually, things, especially, for a daycare use, it would be hard to remove it.
Yeah.
Because it's a popular site. But getting back to people who attended, I really appreciate, the fact that everyone's been, usually when I get called Mr. Tomasello that many times, it's not great. But this one, I do appreciate it. I think what we have here, obviously, are conflicting, a wish of the community conflicts with, especially the environmental policy of the city. But there are some other things that have kind of been percolating from
from the perspective of what we negotiated with the county,
Bless you.
we, as I put in my memo, we leased the property for a specific purpose. Our intention was to clean the entire, take the old tennis courts, the old basketball court, all the hardscape except the parking off, and just make it a grass field, because there's lots of demand for open play in Kentlands, Lakelands. I'm not sure I think someone mentioned that somehow I was interpreting that as being not appropriate for a new urbanist community. That's not exactly what the memo says. It says actually new urbanist communities need open play area by nature of the density of the lots that are installed. And of course the middle school also uses the turf field, and it gets heavily used, and having an annex to that field could come in really useful at that part as well. I was the one who went before the county council committee and made statements that this is what we were going to do, and was asked, you're not going to put anything on it, right? And the answer was no. So it is a little difficult or awkward, or whatever you want to call it, to go back to the county just a few months later and say, well, we've changed our mind. We'd like to put structures on there now. Not impossible, but a challenge, since the county is clearly our biggest partner on a lot of things. But
it's not as heavy a lift as if we were putting an aquatic center there.
That's probably the least challenging of the issues.
Yeah.
The issue of creation of constituencies, I believe, is real, and that's why I put it in a memo. I believe if the county wanted to reclaim the property for whatever purpose, either a county use or an MCPS use, and it was a dog park, they would have a petition entitled "Save Our Dog Park" within days, and that would be a challenge for them that they would prefer to avoid. We obviously would like for them to look at it as a potential school annex site or school site. I don't know how long a shot that is. But I think it's appropriately pointed out as a challenge to repurposing even part of the site. And really the main concern we have is that it's hard to tell where water goes just by looking at a site. It only takes a degree or two of tilt to have water run off the site, and even the possibility of contamination of the Muddy Branch would obviously not be something that our environmental policies, which we consider ourselves leaders in, would tolerate. I have not reached out. One of our people who spoke tonight said that they had spoken to the Muddy Branch Alliance, and that the response was someone with experience should walk the site, and perhaps that's where we might need to go next with this. Is if we could determine, if there is in fact a danger to the lakes or the streams. The lakes are really close by, and I remember the stories where National Geographic, before I even got 30, 40 years ago, used to dump barrels of ink into the lakes to slow down algae growth from geese and from dogs and things that were polluting the lake. Obviously, that's not a practice that we would tolerate any longer, but it's not something that we want to revisit. And it's certainly possible, according to our own stormwater people, that given the proximity to the ponds, that it would first foul the ponds and then the ponds drain into the Muddy Branch. Right now, there is no fecal contamination in the Muddy Branch, but there's no dog park either. So it's difficult to make a connection until that can be confirmed. So, we are, I think we can expect, if we make the ask to the county, that they'll want hard data about, since they themselves will not build a dog park any longer in a stream valley or a forest conservation area, that they would point that out as because this is their property. We are a lessee. We do not have the authority to place structures on it right now. And then finally, it's not in the memo, this is not in the capital budget. And a dog park is as comprehensive as you want to make it. If it's just a fence, it's probably a fairly reasonable amount of money. To fence an acre, could be in the $10,000, $20,000 range. But most dog parks have water. Most dog parks have power and furniture, and they have to be resodded and closed from time to time, so there's a lot of maintenance involved. Water especially would be a challenge, since there's no water service to the site right now. We'd have to underground a line. So that, if in fact, after we jump through whatever hoops that we jump through, and if you decide to move forward on it, I think it should actually be in the capital plan, as opposed to just be an ad hoc construction of a fence or something like that. So staff has some concerns, which I
would. Tony, do you have a sense of what operating costs are for the other dog park annually?
Mark just left.
You can get it to us later.
Yeah, I can. It's substantial.
Well, I think
it is.
Well, related to the other dog park, I think we have to talk about the issues that we've had to deal with at the other dog park. I mean, we voted
yes.
recent. So if that's the rest of your presentation, I'll let you go.
That's okay.
But I think it's a pretty important thing to consider, because it's not just putting a fence around an area. There are other issues that we've had to deal with the other dog park, which is really only 2 miles from this site.
It is, and that is where I get the analogy of the possessiveness. That's where I would start with the dog park at Green Park. It's not just a dog park; it's their dog park. And you recall, we had people come to the podium a couple years ago. You know, they didn't even want youngsters from the neighborhood using the water fountain in there, you know, because they didn't close the gate, or they didn't feel good about them. You know, they didn't have a dog, so what were they doing in there? It tends to be really possessive. Then you add that to the fact that it's really difficult to keep, there's fights among the dogs. We've had a number of bites there, which, use of a dog park, you have to assume liability or risk for that there could be dog bites, especially if you get between two fighting animals. We close it for several months a year. We have to reseed. And I get the sense that even if you put it up to a vote of the neighbors around Green Park, they would probably close that facility and make it into more of a passive park. So it's popular with a limited number of people. I would say as many people use it, or I'm sorry, more people tell me they tried using it and now they don't use it anymore because their experience was not what they were expecting, than people who use it regularly. You have people coming home from the hotels. You have people that have unlicensed dogs going in there. It's not, it's not the environment that people always think it is. And we have that experience that people wouldn't know unless they've been over there regularly. So there are challenges at Green Park as well.
In terms of fee structure, so anyone who is a city resident with a city licensed dog can go into the Green Park facility and use it.
Yes.
And if I remember we had a discussion about this a couple of years ago. If you're not a city resident, can you buy a membership, or you're not allowed to use it at all? I don't remember what we decided on there.
You get a tag from the city.
Yeah, it has to be licensed with the city. The dog has to be licensed.
I think so.
Okay. The reason I ask is also because one of the speakers tonight suggested, members of the neighborhood would be willing to pay a fee to supplement either operational or capital costs for something like this. But my concern is we've got to treat every dog park in the city fairly, and we can't pick some neighborhoods where people might be able to afford to have a fee to supplement it and do a public city park there, and not be able to do it in another place where another community might want it but couldn't afford a fee. So we have to think about that a little bit. Mm-hmm. I mean, just a point of discussion as you're having these conversations with staff, something to work out. I think it can be worked out if we decide as a council that we want to move in that direction, but I just want to raise it as something to think about.
Mm-hmm. And I think another comment that was made at the mic tonight is that it's not widely used by the neighborhood, but we haven't finished cleaning the site either. We haven't programmed it. We have not advertised it as being available. There's no signage there. I think when people get in the habit of using it, either for pickup games or for formal programming by Parks and Rec, you'll see a lot more activity on that site.
Who would be able to use this dog park, Tony? Would it just be for the Kentlands Lakelands residents, or would it just be a city open park?
It would have to be open to the public.
It would have to be a city open city for anybody who has a licensed dog in the city.
Even if we wanted to, it's county property. I'm pretty sure they would never allow it to just be city residents only.
Right, so it won't just be city residents.
Oh, so it could be county residents.
Anybody that has a licensed animal, if they want to license it in the city, but they live in North Potomac. A lot of people who took the survey were outside the city boundaries because it's close to this site.
Well, I mean, I think beyond that, are you suggesting that the county would require that even somebody who has a licensed pet that is licensed by the county but not by the city would be able to use it as well?
I believe so, yeah.
Okay, so that's different than what you just said.
So the biggest problem we've had in working with the county is their inability to figure out a way to subsidize the things that we offer in terms of fees related to operating costs.
Right.
I mean, if we look at what happened at the Gaither Center, when it was still the senior center, and the county basically dropped all support of that for county residents who were members of that.
Absolutely.
And so basically, we had to we raised the fee for non-city residents considerably. That did drop the membership, but we still have a significant membership of county residents. I don't know how we would handle that here. I remember when when we were figuring out what was going to happen with Green Park, part of the issue was whether or not it would be available to non-city residents. And I think we resolved that in part by making sure that any dog that used it had to have a city tag.
Mm-hmm.
But the county doesn't pay us for any of that, any access or anything like that. So.
No. And I imagine if the county got a request not only to change the lease, but also to fund it,
Right.
there's no chance they're going to do that. They'll just deny the change of the lease.
Right.
Or they'll say you can do it, but that would just be too much for us to undertake. I also mentioned to you guys in an email that Montgomery Parks is actively looking for new sites. Park and Planning does not have any parks in Gaithersburg, nor does the county. So they might have one that's drivable, but certainly they wouldn't have one that's walkable from any of these communities.
I think the closest county dog park is in Germantown. It's about 5 miles away or something, I think, isn't there?
There's one.
Yeah, it's in up 355, right past Milestone.
Is that where?
There's one.
Yeah.
It's pretty small. I don't even think it's an acre, but they have a survey and some maps out of some other kind of non-traditional places that they're looking at to put dog facilities. It just wouldn't be in the city because they don't. There's a long story about why there's no parks or park and planning facilities in the city.
So Tony, excuse me. I know that the capital improvements budget for the city is under some pressure at this point. We've had this conversation as we've gone through various budget cycles that it looks like, we've got a number of major projects, including a couple of major park projects that are coming through the cycle that are pretty pricey. So my concern would be that if we put it in the CIP, it's likely to be somewhere out in the future, not as immediate as I think the residents would like. The question is, just spitballing now, is it possible that we could take our lease and sublease it to the Kentlands Lakelands and let them deal with the costs of doing this? I think there was some interest. I just don't know if it's practical.
There really was some discussion of whether the KCA wanted to fund some of this. That is not in their letter of support. And the Lakelands, as you know, chose not to support the project at all from the Lakelands. So,
but they didn't
certainly
oppose,
possible.
They didn't oppose it either. Lakelands just took no position.
They took no position.
Yeah.
That would be similar to where we own the property under the daycare and the county leases it from us, and then they lease it back to somebody else. It is a similar situation. So, but whether the KCA would fund something that's necessarily open to the public, that would be their call, I guess.
Yeah.
So I think the first question is going to be, how much money do we think would it take? As you said, if it's just a matter of putting up a fence, that's fairly modest. But if it's a matter of running water and providing furniture and things like that, the price starts going up. That's the upfront cost. Then what does it cost to maintain? One of the challenges with dog parks is not everybody picks up after their pet. So I don't want to have to spend a lot of city money on the poop collectors. Not a job a lot of people would be ready to sign up for anyway.
We've done that many times at Green Park.
Well, exactly.
The conditions got to be so difficult that we just had to. And that's when you're paying a trained and certified animal control officer to do that work. You're really overpaying.
So I think we need to understand what those numbers are and figure out where that fits in the city's budget and planning, and if there's other ways to supplement some of that.
Yeah, I would agree with that, and I would also, at least for me, I would say that 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 more detailed, more thorough kind of review of the environmental issues and the stormwater management issues that we've been talking about would also be something that I would want to have some data points on, if we can, whether it's the city doing that or somebody else doing that in a reliable fashion. I understand that, you know, we can't be perfect about it because, you know, there's certain limitations on what we can figure out by looking at the lot, but I'd like to get a little more data on that so that we have a better understanding of what the real impacts are on the environment.
Yeah, if I can
yeah.
ask, could that be the first data point? I think we may have someone who can perform that work on a task order contract already with PW, so maybe we'll get that done pretty quickly if I can spend a little bit of money.
To me, that strikes me as sort of the obvious step one. Let's get the information on that issue. And then maybe staff can also start collecting up some of the, you know, potential budget impacts that Neil mentioned. And if we can look at those two categories of information and then, you know, think about where we want to go after that. But before you would start having any negotiations with the county.
The environmental assessment, I think, would inform your discussion with the county.
Oh,
for sure.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So do we have any insight as to why the county wanted to do it on this, you know, lease it to us and possibly claw it back again basis? I mean, are they thinking that this might be a school site? I know we've had the conversation, but I just don't know what's in their head, or they have something else in mind for this?
That would be giving them a lot of credit for strategy. The county negotiated absolutely in good faith. I'm not sure that they have anything in mind, but it's their policy to get the property back. And their process for disposing of surplus property is really complex. So possibly the lease was constructed in this fashion to avoid, you know, having to offer it to outside parties or other municipalities or nonprofits and things like that, because they would like to. You know, they've done a major solar project here. You never know when they may want to. This was actually mentioned as a potential site for an elementary school kind of training thing for bicycles, which Dennis and I discussed, which is a little odd. But the fact that they knew that this site was owned by the county seemed material to us, and that it may be something that they have in the back of their mind that they're going to want to get back. Which I'd probably do the same thing.
So do you feel guided so far?
So it sounds to me like let's find out where the water's flowing, and then that will be step one. And to get you construction costs, I'm thinking of a standard water provided dog park with fencing and electricity and benches, construction costs and annual maintenance costs.
Nothing fancy, but just sort of the basics of
what we have at Green Park, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it would have to be removed with 90 days notice, so I don't think we would want to put too much there. Okay.
How is Green Park regulated? Is it just by?
A lot of it is reported by the users. Animal control does go by. We have written citations there. But I mean, we only have 3 field officers to cover the entire week, so I doubt they're there more than a couple hours a week.
Well, we still need to know about operating a facility like that.
Yeah, I would say most of the operating is in the maintenance of the turf, because I mean the grass just dies within a few months, and then you have mud and it erodes, and that's a different problem.
Would it be possible to get refreshed usage numbers for Green Dog Park to see whether or not there is a population that could support 2 dog parks? And then if there's going to be a comparison, if the numbers show only 1 dog park is supported, then we can do a comparison between the 2 sites as to which should be the city's dog park. I hope I didn't just upset a bunch of
That's tricky because, you know, you can't prove a negative, right? Like, there are people who may not go to Green because it's not within a certain radius of where they live, but they would go to a dog park if it was closer to their house. So the numbers at Green wouldn't necessarily prove or disprove the interest in a park closer to other parts of the city. But I understand what you're asking.
I'm just concerned about operating costs of 2 dog parks.
I believe the number of non-city resident permits that we sold for Green Park is I think it's under 20.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll check that.
All right.
We'll get started on that right away. Get back to you as soon as possible.
Thank you, Tony. From the city attorney.
Nothing this evening.
Anything from any other staff? Okay, not seeing anything. Then I'll remind everybody that next Monday we have our off-site work session at 704 Quince Orchard Road. If you're interested in joining us for that, please contact Municipal Clerk Doris Stokes by Friday, March 8th at 301-258-6310 for more information.
Could I jump in for a sec? I've been to that facility now twice in the last 2 weeks at various meetings, and it's definitely worth seeing. It's really very cool space at 704 Quince Orchard for startup biotech companies. Really nice common area. It's almost like a WeWork facility.
Will they have the cold brew flowing?
And they have cool video games too.
Yeah, and video games.
I set a high score while we were there.
I'm gonna have to set up a
Pac-Man.
separate appointment because that's, I'll be at NLC that day.
Yeah, we won't make it.
Well, thank you for that plug. Until next time, let's do great things, Gaithersburg. We are adjourned.